that means in a heritage context for the buildings. So what are we doing in Queensland? Effectively, there's a national framework that we're going through in this space, and so we're seeing improvements of energy efficiency in new buildings being rolled out through the building codes of Australia through the energy efficient requirements. So we've got Section J for commercial buildings, and we've got Part 3 of the volume for energy efficient houses that are doing with that. And that's, in Queensland, meant that we've moved to the 6-star housing for energy efficient standard for houses. We've gone to 5-star energy efficiency for units. We've also picked up improvements in water efficiencies, all of which have been rolled out through either the Building Code of Australia or through the Queensland Development Code. And in some of those spaces, you will note that Queensland has been quite innovative and moved ahead of the rest of Australia in terms of rolling out this policy. So the Queensland Government has demonstrated its commitment to addressing particularly abatement issues through building standards. So one of the things that we've done in this space, of course, is to do with energy efficiency for air conditioners, and you may be aware that currently there's a requirement that all air conditioners installed in Queensland must have an EER, or energy equivalency rating, of at least 2.9. And what that's about is making sure that if we are going to rely on air conditioners, we're using the most efficient air conditioners that are available to us. We've also implemented into new commercial buildings and any renovations or retrofits of existing buildings the requirement to have sub-metering. And as Natalie was talking about before, that's about making sure we can get into that space of the tenant versus owner sort of divide and make sure that tenants can be held directly responsible for the energy they're using. And it's about taking away those perverse incentives for, say, tenants to use as much energy as they like, knowing that that will be distributed through the cost to the, either the owner or the other tenants in the building. One of the other things that we're currently in the space of doing, we haven't quite finished yet, but we're very close, is rolling out the end-of-trip facility. And as Dave was talking about before, this is about acknowledging that there's more than one way to get to work. And for a lot of the people in this room, perhaps like myself, who do sometimes hop on a bike when we've got time and go to work that way, this is about providing people with an option of how they get to and from work and giving them, particularly in Queensland where, I don't know anybody else, I arrive at work after my bike needing a bit of a shower, giving people adequate facilities so that they can make that a reasonable option for them to get to and from work. Now, David has raised the issue of the commercial building disclosure program. What I'll do now is just quickly run through what that is so that I don't know if people are all aware of it here or not. From the 1st of November of this year, there has been a requirement for any building that is sold or leased involving office space of greater than 2,000 square metres to make a mandatory disclosure. And that will involve essentially having a building energy efficiency certificate being issued. In many ways, it's similar to Queensland's Sustainability Declaration for residential houses, in that there's no requirement when you issue the certificate to do anything other than issue the certificate. There's no requirement, for instance, for buildings to improve their energy efficiency or to take any particular action. What it is structured at, though, is providing information to the market so that people who are looking to buy a building or to move into a tenancy will have information about how efficient or otherwise that particular building is. And as David says, that will provide particular challenges for the older building stock that, in terms of pure operational energy efficiency, may struggle to meet the same sort of outcomes. The reason for that is that we expect, as David indicated, that many tenants and many building owners will be attracted towards what are seen as to be more energy efficient buildings. Now, running through the mechanics of the program, effectively what it means is if you're leasing or selling office space that's greater than 2,000 square metres in any configuration, where be it a whole building or part of a building or individual floors, that's when the requirement will come up. And I'm pretty sure that you're starting to see that coming out in the newspaper advertisements for tenancies, people saying that, the certificates are available and the like. What needs to be disclosed? Well, for the first 12 months, the disclosure is just limited to getting that neighbour's rating, which is talking about how efficient your building is in comparison to the building next door. As we move forward from the 1st of November 2011, there will also be a requirement for the certificate to include a lighting assessment in terms of what energy efficient lighting is being used, and also some general guidance on how the building could be made more energy efficient. Now, one of the, I suppose, the tricks in sort of this space that a lot of developers are looking at is they're saying, well, if I get in the first 12 months, my certificate lasts for 12 months and then I've got a little bit more time on my sleeve. So we're getting industry feedback that they're actually using that as an incentive to get into this program sooner rather than later. The other thing in terms of the information to the market, all of this has to be disclosed at the time of a sale or lease, and we'll have a register that will be online that people can search in terms of whether the building's Green Star ratings, or the neighbours rating rather. So essentially what industry is telling us that, you know, it makes sense to be out there getting this in the space, and it is providing, as David said before, a degree of incentive for people to go with one building type as opposed to another type. It wouldn't be the government if we didn't have fines, as I know from my own past. And so the fines are up to $110,000 for failing to disclose the neighbour's rating when you make your advertisement. So look, this is serious stuff, and we're finding that the development industry and the tenancies and this whole industry is really picking up on these things and starting to move into space. When I'm going along to making presentations to property developers and to tenancy organisations, they're not saying, you know, what I'm trying to say, they're on board. They're in this paradigm, they're accepting it all, and they're looking at ways they can move forward. I said I'd just really touch base on where we're going next, and before I talk about the real impacts on the heritage side of things, what we've decided, or we've come to the view with Queensland Government, is we've done an awful lot of work in that Class 1 residential dwellings, in terms of 6-star housing and, you know, the 5-star units. And we've identified an opportunity outside of those residential buildings for other buildings to start making more of a sort of a pitch towards that 25% that we're trying to reduce. So government policy at the moment is starting to think about how can we move the learnings we've had in that sort of residential side of thing and move it across the building sector generally.